Hey everyone.
Welcome to Ink Scribes, the comics podcast where we talk about the art and craft of comics. I'm Colin Singh, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Eric Zawadzki and Taylor Stauft. Today, we're going to be looking at the career, life, and work of comics pioneer Winsor McCay, specifically his comic strip "Little Nemo in Slumberland" from 1905.
So I have this giant fashion version of the Little Nemo in Slumberland. This is out of print, so you can't find it anymore. But yeah, I find with Tashin, they do an extra large size, and then it's very specialty, so it goes out of print. And then they'll do like a large size, and then that'll go out of print, and then it gets smaller and smaller from there. Taylor, I believe you have the one down from this. So they would be
I
extra
do.
large. One of their large.
Yeah. Even one down is still pretty small, but you can see that this cover only contains about 3 of the panels on the bottom of your edition. That's
Okay.
that's how much it looks like it's been shrunk down. But yeah, it's
And then
it's hefty.
I've got the one down from that, which is even smaller.
That's
Uh,
still a
this is
thick
but
book.
this, yeah, it doesn't cover as long as yours. Mine's 1905 to 1914, which is the amount that I read for this
Oh
episode.
yeah, that's the entire thing. That's
Is it the entire? No, because he came back in the 20. Well, we'll get into it, but he came back in the one with Hearst's blessing to do another run in another newspaper. I think 24 to 26.
well, no, from 1911 to 1914, he was with Hearst.
No, but the strip came back, is what I'm saying. In the he did a short run in the 20s with Hearst blessing.
So I highly recommend people go and get Taylor's version, the one that's in print right now, the large version, because I I'm not 100%, but I think Taschen has this whole process where like they get smaller and smaller as they go through, and you want to get that before it goes out of print because this is the one to own, and you can't buy it anymore. This is printed at like actual size from the originals, and
So is that
I should open it up. Yeah,
that size of actual folded out newspaper size of the day?
I believe it's yeah the actual size, and it comes with
Damn.
it comes with this book here, which is the kind of a biography on Winsor McCay, which we're going to flip through because we're going to talk a bit about his history, and then after that, I'm going to flip through this book.
My
This
God.
this
The
is the
size of this thing.
okay. So we'll grab that later.
And really, you need the size. Like the bigger it is, the better. Because the biography that I have at the front of mine, it is readable, but boy, it's real small. It is.
It's
It
sort
is
of
fine print.
let's see. Yeah, it's sort of replicating a newspaper, so it was supposed to be at this size. And yeah, as it gets
I guess it
smaller,
was probably just folded once then, hey? It's
I think
probably,
so.
yeah. Huh.
yeah. So as we grow up and consume art, we often naively think that we're discovering things as they're being invented. And I know that when I was younger, I would often see like a cool storytelling technique and admire these larger than life artists creating brand new ways of drawing comics. But as I got older, I realized that there were decades of innovators long before I was born. So much of these amazing comic storytelling techniques that I love were being invented in the early 1900s. And as I flipped through these little Nemo strips, I was in awe. Every page is something new and exciting. And yeah, comics were being invented right before your eyes as you look at these strips.
Oh yeah.
So, in this episode, I want to take the viewers along with me and admire some of the storytelling techniques that were being invented well over a century ago. But yeah, first we'll cover some history of this pioneer. Yeah, so do you guys know much about Winsor McCay?
Only what I've perused in a quick biography. The past was a wild time. Is really what I took away from his biography.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I became aware of him. Like, I can't really pinpoint what book I read or something, but I quickly knew in my early 20s that he was like not godfather of comics, but yeah, a pioneer in terms of like doing comic strips in the newspapers and stuff like that. Like a lot of his storytelling was then really helpful for comics to take off, the comics art form to take off, right? So, but I can't quite remember how or where, but I just knew his name and I knew he did this strip and I knew it was one of
Yeah.
those. Yeah, it was just a scholarly thing that he came by. Right.
I think I may have seen the first time I saw its name was in the Calvin and Hobbes 10th anniversary book.
Yeah,
And like a note from Watterson on like the the impact that McKay had on him.
I want to say that Scott McCloud quoted him or referenced him or something like that. It must have been something like that because when I did read Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud is when I really started to do a deep dive into like, the history of comics and the Yellow Kid. And I was really into how comics came about, so to say, right? But yeah, I can't quite pinpoint. He was in the ether of all that at the
Yeah.
time, right?
I think I might have known his animation work first. I think he animated like Gertie the dinosaur or whatever, and I think I might have seen that. But I only really read these Nemo strips recently, actually, and so yeah, I did a deep dive and read quite a bit of this history for this show for our viewing audience. So yeah, you know, back in the good old days, you would pay a few cents for a newspaper, and you get the news and all the comics as well.
A
So
nickel per
basically,
pape.
sorry.
A
I think I'll
nickel per
hold it up
pape.
to the screen. Mine has a full-size photo of who Winsor McCay or what Winsor McCay looked like.
Boy, that's not what I
Yeah, we have him here. Yeah, there's a
For the viewer to see, yeah.
this is a self-portrait of himself. Um, he was a bit of a dandy, I believe.
Yeah, pretty luxurious in his life, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Oh
He used
yeah,
to
well,
be very
he got rich off comics.
Oh, he did. Okay, I wasn't quite clear if he was getting rich or if he was just living beyond his means and he was just a guy in a suit in New York and that kind of carried him through.
No, he
Oh,
was
that
pretty
like we have heard so many stories of creators being screwed over by major publishers. So I guess we're accustomed to like, oh, back in the old days, you didn't get rich
Yeah.
off art, but in the pioneering days of the comics medium, these creators actually got rich. These creators were treated well and they were paid very well. Uh, the innovation of screwing over artists that probably started in the 1930s. So yeah, he was a very wealthy man because of his comics work.
Oh, okay, great. That's really nice to know. Especially because all I know about Hearst is from Citizen Kane. Like that's just what I envision of just like this miserly old man trying to squeeze money out of all of his employees.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the history of like comics is newspaper barons going to war with each other for circulation, and like the comics were the thing that like that sold papers. Uh,
Oh,
you had like a lot of like less educated people buying newspapers, and a lot of them were buying them for the funnies basically, and uh, these newspaper barons would just throw money at these creators just to buy them, and yeah, again, it was like I guess it was kind of a later innovation to like start screwing them over.
wow. It's okay.
Would you say that William Randolph Hearst, because I read a bit about McKay's biography, right? And later in his career, he did a lot of work for William Randolph Hearst for like political strips and stuff like that. And he was willing to pay him whatever he wanted. I heard that anytime an artist just said their price, he'd be like, okay, and then just give it to them. And some people would be really extreme and some people would be modest. And he would just pay whatever it is. There was no scrutiny in terms of, well, this guy's getting paid this much or anything like that. So, I mean, In McKay's case, because he was doing political strips, and I know that Hearst was leaning more towards that. Well, that's what he expected of him anyway.
Well, yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that.
Okay,
that
cool. Yeah,
eventually.
that's fine.
So a lot of these papers were printed on like wood pulp paper, and which is like extremely acidic, and exposure to light and air caused the paper to break down. So it's difficult to find pages that have survived over the century. But fortunately, there were some people who collected and kept these strips in a good enough condition that we have a book like this to look through.
Wow, that's crazy because it's like a newspaper, especially a daily paper, is not intended to be collected, right?
Yeah.
They're printing it on cheap stuff because it's like, hey, you throw it out at the end of the day. You read it. What more do you need from it? But
Yeah,
I guess-
fortunately, it's like a collectors. We can thank
Yeah.
collectors.
which
And there were a lot of situations where like libraries would would hold on to them, but like and that would preserve it for a little while, but like the edges would be exposed to light, and so you get the edges like fraying. But then apparently, like after World War II, there were like library cleanings, and so a lot of that stuff was thrown out.
Oh, right.
And it's just like certain collectors just kept stuff in their attic away from light, and yeah, but like there are a lot of strips that have been lost for all time, but the big ones got to survive, like Little Nemo and various others.
So in my book, it's referenced that the strip was actually more of a mature fantasy rather than a slapstick comedy that the kids were actually like eating up on Sunday strips.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, as I said, it was, yeah, it was kind of lower class types that were buying the newspapers for these strips. What's interesting is that like Winsor McCay had two strips going on about dreams. He had Dream of the Rarebit Fiend, which was geared towards more adults, and then Little Nemo was geared more towards kids. But I guess like it was nothing but adults consuming it, consuming all this stuff.
A child main character would just draw a kid in just because like, oh, it's me doing a thing that I do. You would, but kids have terrible taste, so
It's true. It's more neurotic than ever, I think. If you watch a Saturday morning cartoon these days, it moves a lot faster than it used to back in the day.
huh.
Okay, so Winsor McCay was born in like September 26th, 1869. He was born in Spring Lake, Michigan, and yeah, to this day they have like a commemorative plaque for him. And yeah, he had a compulsion to draw. He drew on anything and everything, and he had a photographic memory. So yeah, he could draw just purely from memory. And his family wasn't supportive. They didn't really understand art. So he was sent to learn business, and he had to focus on his art in secret. Yeah, so right here, this is a self-portrait. He drew in 1907, but it's like a portrait of him in the late 1890s.
Oh, okay.
In real life, he
Or
he
1880s.
was 5 feet tall. Was the tallest he got.
Which, like, even at that time, is still short. Like the average height then is like 5'8".
Yeah, luckily it was the same height as his wife, though. He and his wife were the same height, so
Yeah, it says here he had a dandy-like appearance, and yeah, he compensated for his small and weak physical stature with fashion.
Small and weak. Oh, what a drive-by.
So yeah, he was working in like a dime store museum while going to like business school. Yeah, he'd draw like portraits of guests. If a guest walked into this dime store museum and bought art for 25 cents, he'd get to keep half. Now a dime store museum is like a cheap museum showing edutainment.
Oh, okay.
It's basically vaudeville acts. It's a museum that do like freak shows. It was geared towards the lower class, and it was sort of like ripping off P.T. Barnum, the whole thing.
oh yeah.
McKay's time in these dime store museums greatly inspired his later comics work. Just being around such interesting stuff, especially being around the freak shows.
Yeah, just weird stuff next to each other.
So yeah, this image right here is a Detroit dime museum in Vaudeville stage, and so that's like an example of a place he would work. Yeah, so around that time, there was a local paper that covered an exhibition of McKay's drawings that were in like a post office. And the journalist mistook him for a professor of drawing, whatever that is. A professor of drawing. I guess that was a thing. But that got the attention of a real professor, and that professor took him in and basically taught him perspective and color theory. Significantly, he taught McKay that everything on Earth can be reduced to geometric shapes, like primarily spheres, cubes, cylinders. It's our so if you can master the depiction of these abstract shapes from all angles, twists, and turns, you could draw anything. And so yeah, that was great for his development. Yeah, from there he moved away from the Great Lakes to Chicago in 1889. And Chicago was like one of the most modern cities in the New World. The first skyscraper was erected in Chicago in 1885. It had 10 floors.
Whoa!
And yeah, people thought like that building will, the wind is going to take it down. But that's
How could you use your cognitive abilities so high in the air?
So he worked there at a printing and engraving company, helping make advertising posters for private businesses, railroads, and the entertainment industry. And while in Chicago, he followed in his father's footsteps and became a Freemason. So, you conspiracy theory
Yeah, I was gonna bring
theorists,
that up.
make of that what you will.
Yeah. Actually, I won't even mention it now.
Yeah,
feel
and
like it's really more of a it's especially back then, wasn't it really just more of like, this is a businessman's club. We just hang out in business
Yeah.
now.
His dad was buried with full Mason rites or decorations or whatever you call it.
That's what happens when business guys are secretly theater nerds.
so yeah, while he was in Chicago, he saw his first film. Do you guys know about the film that this stripper's referencing?
Wait, is that a Buster Keaton something?
I'll just take your word for it.
And so this is a train like crashing into a bunch of stuff. You know the film The Arrival of a Train at La Ciotat by the Lumiere brothers?
Is that the one that everybody thought, oh God, this train is coming at us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
I've never
yeah.
seen it. It's the sort of thing that you always hear about in film history.
Yeah, I first heard like, oh wow, it's a train coming towards the camera, but it's like this. It's like it's a side view of a train coming. So like when you see it, you're like, well, that's not what I pictured. I pictured it coming straight at the
Yeah.
camera.
Yep.
But like I think like I think it was just like a marketing thing to get them to show up. Like this train will like freak you out. There were stories of viewers fleeing in a panic and yeah, but like that, that was one of the early films, and there's a lot of early films that show up in Little Nemo. So yeah, this headline here, not the best kind of headline, but that's like the first of several problematic qualities.
Oof.
McKay.
Right. Because there's some question about how old he actually is, isn't there? Because
He
of
was
the
10 years older than her.
But I think in order to make it appear less skeevy, he massaged his own age, was like, no, I'm only 19 or something like that, as if that's any better.
Yeah, so like these towering figures that aren't perfect. Throughout the history of art, we get people who aren't necessarily shining examples in their private life, but they're innovators and inspirations in their professional life. And, it is what it is.
Yeah. The past is done with. We can't do anything about it now.
Yeah, so he eventually moved to Cincinnati when he got married, and he worked in a bunch of museums and eventually worked in a newspaper. He worked in both for a bit, but transitioned entirely to newspapers, doing illustration work by about 1897. And then he remained with newspapers for the rest of his life. So this is a Sammy Sneeze strip that he would do years later, but like it's loosely based on one of the freak show acts that he very likely witnessed and drew advertisements for while he worked in dime store museums. It's likely based on an act called the Wild Man of Afghanistan, who you'll be surprised to know was not from Afghanistan, nor was he wild.
No, I'll bet it's a French Canadian guy.
Yeah,
You know, this is the first time I'm seeing a strip that's not Nemo, and it's still, now that I know it's him, it's of course it's him because it's got that well, I'll bring it up later, but that side scroll storytelling style. Yeah.
And the acting.
Exactly. Yeah.
So here we have a picture of Winsor McCay. So he had a job as an illustrator at the largest newspaper in Cincinnati. And this is amazing illustration of the Gar Parade.
That's an I thought that was a photo.
Oh, yeah.
You thought that was a photo?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just stunning. It's so the Gar Parade. It's the Grand Army of the Republic. They were an organization of Civil War veterans, and yeah, so
We
this
go
is from.
bring that trade alliance into alignment with Coruscant.
I don't understand that reference at all.
That's a Star Wars
Star
reference.
Wars.
That is a
Star
prequel
Wars.
Star Wars reference. You can cut that.
Eric.
Coruscant.
Coruscant. That's how you say it in your head, like me. We're the same, you and I.
So interestingly, part of his style was his pictures would have like unusually thick outlines, and then the airlines would be a lot thinner. So you can see it's very obvious on here. And someone at this time who witnessed his process said he had a unique approach to drawing. When drawing a figure, he would draw the outline of that figure in one line without consulting reference or his roughs or preliminary sketches, just pure knowledge of the human form. And then he would fill in the inner details.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could see that happen, because that's an unparalleled ability to picture something in your mind and then project it onto what you're drawing on.
Oh, like no doubt, like some sort of weird prodigy. But like he had a photographic memory, and you know what? You can kind of see it because you can kind of see it for the flaws in the work, like the beautiful flaws you see every now and then, or when things might not necessarily perfectly line up if you prepared more. But at the same time, it's kind of perfect in its own way. Like it's stunning that he's able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that like that's part of why he was so prolific, why he produced so much work, was because he had that unusual ability. But when you look at these strips now, you can see that outline of the figure. It's very visible, and yeah, knowing that process makes it interesting to look at.
It also really draws your eye to the human figure so that they don't get. I mean, we'll see it more in the Little Nemo strip, but it really does draw your eye to the characters and what they're doing, so that they kind of pop out against these immaculate and very detailed backgrounds.
Yeah, it's very appealing. It's a very appealing style. So yeah, as a newspaper illustrator, he had to be true to life so that the illustrations can serve as realistic and authorized depictions of events. But they also needed to be decorative enough to catch the reader's eye. You ideally wanted to be more eye-catching than competing newspapers. Yeah, around this time, he also illustrated for Life magazine, among other magazines at this time. This, I think, is a Life magazine illustration.
Wait, sorry. He had to his illustrations for political cartoons had to?
No, not political cartoons. So he was an artist reporter. And yeah, he would drive out to fires, court proceedings, lynch mobs, social events, stuff like that, and he would draw those events. That would give him an edge over like photojournalists when they were hampered by like tight spaces or there were like bad lighting conditions.
Yeah.
He would go to the event and then rush back to finish his drawing and hopefully get it printed before any other kid would do the same.
Oh, wow. That's also incredibly impressive to just be at what is probably a chaotic scene and just, yeah, I got it. Yep.
Yeah, like I said, that goes towards his photographic memory.
Have you read Jack Kirby by Tom Scioli?
Yes.
No?
Right. And there's a scene in there where he's referencing I really don't want to butcher it, but basically Kirby could draw from memory in a way where he was present all the time. And it's outlined in that book. Like I won't go into it. I don't want to spoil the book. It's Kirby's life story. Read it for yourself. It's really good. It's out there. It's an imprint. But there's a scene where he talks about going to the what was that fair back in the day? You went to some
World's Fair.
The
the
world's
world
fair.
stuff. And he said, and I don't want to butcher it. There's a caption where he says, "This event changed the way I looked at the world for the rest of my life." And he could like just channel it and reference it every time he was drawing any gadget, any weapon, any costume design,
yes,
any
okay.
vehicle, anything is he referenced that this fair is the thing that was able to do it for him.
That's interesting you bring that up because I think the 1893 Chicago World Fair might have been a really big deal for Winsor McCay's work on Little Nemo, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. Another very short artist who was inspired by our World's
Yeah,
Fair.
that's right.
Yeah, so we see all these images here. Basically, the author of this book posits that McKay's experience with visiting sideshows and freak shows broadened his outlook on human anatomy beyond what he learned at school.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see in this blown up Nemo panel, it's very clear that his experiences among circus acts was just inspirational to his later comics work. So here we have like a Dream of the Rarebit themed excerpt where his hands are like deformed in kind of a similar way to the Elephant Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and just there's a lot of examples like this character looks like Jojo the Russian dog face boy. Uh, yeah, he was like a Russian boy with hypertrichosis, who was apparently McKay's favorite subject at his dime store doings.
Huh.
I don't think there's like any examples of posters that he drew from those old dime store museums because, yeah, they were just constantly painted over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a we've got this paper, let's use it as much as possible sort of situation.
Yeah, I guess nobody saw it as like a great artist working on it. He's just
Nah.
like just a dime store worker. Just a worker bee.
Because the thing is, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these are saved as a result of all the Nemo strips are saved as a result of just, oh, I really like them. Like I just like collecting them. I like having, somebody that just cuts them out every day or every week and
Yeah, and I mean also
maintains
in
them.
those newspapers, the circulation is just so big. Like
Oh yeah.
you have more chances that somebody would keep them. So yeah, around this time he left the dinosaur museums and yeah, a competing Cincinnati newspaper ended up hiring McKay, giving him a considerably larger salary and made him director of the art department. So along with completing illustrations, he had to review and answer for hundreds of his colleagues' illustrations.
Whoa.
Do you know that if it was maybe the editor of the paper who scouted him out, or was it like that's a lot of power to give to someone up front?
Yeah, I mean, eh, his abilities are undeniable. So he was in a smaller paper, and just the bigger paper saw his skills and hired him, just like that. So in 1902, the Cincinnati Enquirer adds a comic supplement to the Sunday newspaper. It started out in black and white, and then became color by 1903. So they licensed a lot of comics from Hearst's newspapers in New York, like scripts like Foxy Grandpa and the Cat's Jammer Kid.
Foxy Grandpa?
Yeah, I don't know what. I assume
Rat.
it's a fox, but
Awesome.
I don't know.
And Buster Brown, all that, right?
Yeah. So like this was basically it was a small town paper. Well, I mean, Cincinnati, I guess, just not as big as New York, and they just mainly just got their strips from the big city papers. Except in their Sunday supplement, they had an in-house creation at the very back, A Tale of the Jungle Ints by Felix Fiddle. This way, which McKay illustrated, and it's not quite a comic, but it's like
No,
yeah, it's moving in that direction because you have panels, but it's like
it it almost looks. It reminds me of a silent film where you'll see the visuals and then be given just a
right, yeah.
screen of dialogue.
Actually, yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, so there were 43 episodes, and almost all these pages have been lost forever because it was never syndicated. The
Oh,
strips never left Cincinnati. So yeah, it wasn't really a comic, and McKay didn't really have control over the content. He was just illustrating the poems that were written by a guy named George Randolph Chesker. So it was like a dark humor take on why certain animals look the way they do. The strip had like a regular formula in which the jungle imps would torture an animal, and then a group of apes would come in and save and repair the animals, providing the modifications that allowed the animals to better stand up to the imps in the future.
huh?
Yeah, it's extremely racist.
Yeah,
It just dawned on me that this book that you're going through, these aren't actual articles. I thought that they were also actual. I don't know. No, it's just designed that way.
Yeah, it's just it's a very cool design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's very racist. It's using imagery that was like popular at that time based on like racist minstrel shows. Yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate stain on an otherwise brilliant cartoonist's career.
But they all went through that. That whole generation did, you know?
Yeah, I mean this is an example of like the racist minstrel shows right here. Yeah. Interestingly, the yeah, this author brings up a little bit of the history in here about like that racist imagery. And there is a line that can be connected between like the characters of Felix the Cat, Oswald the Rabbit, Mickey Mouse, Daffy Duck, and these old minstrel characters. Uh, they're just sort of like anarchal characters with the, slapstick humor.
Yeah, yeah. They just kind of create mischief wherever they go.
Yeah, and so you can see here they're like torturing this porcupine, and so the apes come and fix the porcupine, and then now when the apes attack, the porcupine like shoots their quills, and so that's an example. This was like this was a ripoff of a Rudyard Kipling children's book called Just So Stories from 1902. So yeah, it
Okay.
was just basically a ripoff.
I feel like that's the sort of thing that really happened a lot back then, because by the time Rudyard Kipling found out about it, he'd probably be like, I'm not going to Cincinnati. That's not happening.
Yeah, exactly. Because like yeah, again, it didn't leave Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Okay. So by this time, comics were booming. They were responsible for a large part of the sales of newspapers at the time. Newspapers competed to get great talent, pulling them away from other papers with larger salaries. So the big city newspapers would keep an eye out for like burgeoning talent at the smaller cities, and that's how McKay was found. Yeah, basically, a big New York City newspaper found him and offered him a job.
The real dream.
Yeah.
Toiling away, you get discovered, given a bunch of money. Hell yeah.
So this is the first Little Sammy Sneeze, the first color Little Sammy Sneeze. It started off as like a black and white strip, and this is the only one that's like this is an 8-panel grid, and everything after this is a 6-panel grid. Okay, so New York was quite a bit more lively than Chicago or Cincinnati. Around this time, construction was underway on higher, ever more spectacular buildings. Smoke filled the sky with all the coal furnaces that provided heat for buildings. And yeah, this is Herald Square, the publishing house of the New York Herald, where he ended up working. And the printing press was located in this building. You could actually walk down the street and like peer inside and see the most impressive printing press in New York, basically for the foreseeable future around that time. James Gordon Bennett was the owner of this paper, and some of the reasons why this collection is so impressive is because the printing press was so modern, and it
Oh.
was able to survive more than a lot of the other strips. So yeah, the roof of this Herald Square building had 24 bronze owls with constantly blinking electric bulbs in their sockets,
What?
and yeah, and there's a Nemo strip towards the end of the New York Herald years where they get on top of the building, and then an owl actually joins them on their like airship journey for the rest of the New York Herald years.
That's cool. I do like that he is pulling from his own, just the disparate elements of his life to put into a dream sequence, because like that's what actually happens in dreams, right? You're just pulling from
Yeah.
what you already know.
I mean, like, he was just a creative force of nature, and yeah, he's just pulling from all his experiences and everything around him. And there were three newspaper moguls at this time. There was William Randolph Hearst, his arch rival Joseph Pulitzer, and then James Gordon Bennett, who ran the New York Herald, New York Herald, and the Evening Telegram. So he had two papers. He had like the morning paper and the night paper. So he hired McCay. Yeah, this section of the book kind of speaks about the newspaper war that was going on around this time. Actually, it ended around the time that McKay showed up. It ended because of the assassination of President William McKinley.
What?
Yeah, like they were basically two papers, just like a left and a right paper, just with competing sensationalist headlines. And it was just like they were trying to sell papers, and yeah, it riled up the people quite a bit and led to a presidential assassination.
From an anarchist, no doubt.
So yeah, Hearst's and Pulitzer's sensationalist papers were targeted to the lower class workers, but Bennett's New York Herald was geared more toward the middle class and more culturally minded. So yeah, McKay was drawing stuff for more a higher class audience. So when he started there in 1903, the Herald's most important comic artist was Richard Outcault, who famously created Hogan's Alley, which featured the Yellow Kid. You guys familiar with the Yellow Kid? I guess you mentioned it earlier, Colin.
It's pretty much the first comic character ever.
Well, he's the first big time
Yeah.
comic character.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, and Hogan's Alley started out as, I guess, in 1895, and it was sort of a halfway between illustration and comic strip, and it slowly evolved over time into a comic strip. Like the Yellow Kid had his dialogue was written on his body, and then it was a single illustration, and then every now and then you'd get a strip which had panels, and then eventually word balloons would be added, and then other illustrators would adapt some of that stuff, and then you have like a second strip that had panels and word balloons, and then it sort of solidified what a comic is. Like it didn't come out fully formed; it sort of like morphed into this.
Yeah.
So by the time McKay shows up at this paper, like the language of comics were brand new. It had been developed like 5 or 6 years prior. And yeah, he was there to be one of the earliest comic creators.
And I think you can see him at least through the first year of Little Nemo, at least really refine that language and learn how to use it better.
Well, and bend and break it a bit, and just like play, which is which we'll get into because it's just so fun to watch someone invent all this stuff and who goes.
Yeah.
So Outcult like originally worked for Pulitzer's paper, it was Pulitzer's paper that like started the big comic movement, and then all the other papers started grabbing it. So like Hearst basically hired the entire comic section away from Pulitzer just by spending money, and so Outcult like went from Pulitzer's paper to Hearst's paper, and then eventually he was at James Gordon Bennett's New York Herald with McKay. There's an interesting thing where like when Outcalt left Pulitzer's paper to work for Hearst, Pulitzer still owned Hogan's Alley, but like I guess he could still take his characters, just not that title. So he had the Yellow Kid as a comic strip in Hearst's paper, and so there were two Yellow Kid comics going on at the same time,
Oh.
which is where the term yellow journalism comes from. Like that sensationalist newspaper quality was called yellow journalism because both
Yeah.
papers had the Yellow Kid.
Yeah, that kind of, well, circulation's down. We need a war. What
Yes.
if we drum up support for the invasion of the Philippines or whatever?
Cuba, wasn't it?
Something, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Teddy Roosevelt invading Cuba.
Yeah. It was like that was like a war that was created to sell newspapers.
Yep.
So here's some illustrations by McCay. So he was drawing comics, but he was also doing like illustrations. This is for it's called the Spectrophone. It's a serial novel about a device that could look into the future, which is like so perfect for someone as creative as McCay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, starting in late 1903, McCay tried out several strips, many of them one-offs. He was just like throwing stuff at the wall to see if it stuck. So he created like Mr. Good Enough and Sister's Little Sister. And right here we have Furious Finish of the Foolish Phillips Furious Frolics.
Boy.
Yeah. Yeah, but he tried all that stuff out, and he finally found success with Little Sammy Sneeze in 1904, which I guess, Colin, you said that you haven't seen any of these other strips before.
No, I've never. And even in this book, I think there's only 4 or 5 pages of an introduction, and then the rest is just strips. So this is more of an introspective on yours, eh?
This book, yeah, and then I'll get to the other book later. But yeah, so it's funny because he's got all these strips have like a formula. Like with Little Nemo, we know the formula is like the last panel is him waking up. So the Sammy Sneeze's formula is that like he would involuntarily sneeze at the worst possible moment, just creating maximum damage. And then a lot of the early strips, he'd just be they kick the kid out of like civilized society or whatever.
That last panel of a father kicking his own son
Up the stairs it makes no sense, but it's just so perfectly rendered of just put my whole body into this. Fuck this kid.
Just amazing.
Hey, it was you had to really sell it back then, you know?
Well, and that sort of thing is really acceptable, right? Like, it would be weird if
Oh,
you
of
didn't
course, yeah.
smack your kid around. It would be weird if you didn't dress them up like Little Lord Fauntleroy, which I've seen references to.
Yeah, right here is Little Lord Fauntleroy.
Yeah.
Which that was the children's book published in 1886, and
It's
was
very
children's
forgotten.
fashion.
Actually.
Yeah,
I
the only
referenced that
reason.
the other day, and no one knew what I was talking about.
Really?
Yeah.
I've only ever known it as like an example of just the softest of children.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's how like the upper class address their kids, right? And that's how like Little Sammy Sneezes are dressed.
Wait, as like.
Well, in that fashion, I guess, not
Yeah.
deliberately as that character, but that was just the fashion at the time.
Yeah, you'd wear a dress regardless of gender. You'd be wearing a dress till you were like 5, and then you got to wear, if you were a boy, you got to wear shorts.
Yeah. So Sammy Sneeze, the newspapers would have like comic strips throughout the interiors of the paper, and then on Sundays they would have the colored section. And so Sammy Sneeze started out in the regular newspaper and got popular enough that it graduated into the Sunday supplemental colored section, which it would have the front and the back would be 4 color strips. It would be like CMYK, and then the interiors would be like a 2 color strips.
What are the two
But
colors?
well, actually, you can see. We'll look a little bit later at the Little Nemo and by 2 color it just mean like black and then another color.
Oh, okay.
With basically a single color process. So from 1904 to 1905, McCay created 4 series. He created Dream of the Rabbit Fiend, The Story of Hungry Henrietta, something called A Pilgrim's Progress by Mr. Bunyan. And then finally, at the end of the year, he created Little Nemo.
That's an insane amount of
Oh
turnout.
my god, yeah, he was just
Was this
so creative around this time.
Did he pass those on to others, or did they get canceled, or like?
Actually, a lot of them went on for years. Hungry Henrietta only lasted about 5 to 6 months. That was it was about a little girl who obsessively eats, and I guess she sobs if she is denied food. But this is one of the earliest comic crossovers because Hungry Henrietta shows up in a Sammy Sneeze strip, and yeah, and then shortly after that, like Hungry Henrietta is canceled. But here we see like a book that was collecting all the little Sammy Sneeze strips. But another one of his is A Pilgrim's Progress by Mr. Bunyan. So this is a reference to an early Christian book called The Pilgrim's Progress from This World to That Which Is to Come. So this strip features Mr. Bunyan. Every episode, Mr. Bunyan tries and fails to get rid of his suitcase. The suitcase has dull care written on it, and this refers to the inevitability of having to struggle with worries in life, like life's dull burden. So instead of enjoying life, he focuses on getting rid of this suitcase. Life would be instantly so much more beautiful and carefree if he could just rid himself of this suitcase, which is representative of like life's problems.
What an esoteric idea for a comic.
That sounds brilliant. So brilliant. That would work today, I think.
Yeah, like so its formula was just every strip he would try to get rid of his suitcase and then always end up back with it.
You're right, Colin. That is a Vertigo book if I've ever heard one.
100%.
And yeah, so that one was in the Evening Telegram. It would show up. So here's an example of like what a newspaper would look like, and like you'd have all the articles, and then at the bottom here you'd have this is a Dream of the Rabbit Bean script, but you would have like this would be one of those as well. And yeah, that went on for about 5 years.
These strips were full page. Like I'm seeing these strips here that they're shrunk down, right?
No, so a lot of if you see a black and white one, a lot of them were basically in the like this is a full newspaper
Just
with like a lot of
crammed
articles and advertisements, and
in.
it's like a small.
I was gonna comment once we actually got to the Little Nemo strips, is like the lettering like made me go blind. Like literally, I was just like,
Well, the Little Nemo strips were printed in the Sunday supplement, so those ones were legitimately big. But yeah, you see the black and white ones; those are various sizes. So they're not always the size, but like often they would be that size.
okay.
So here's some more little Sammy Sneeze strips. So yeah, it's interesting to note that the more children focused stuff is credited to Winsor McCay, but like the more adult stuff that showed up in like the evening paper, Dream of the Rabbit Bean here, it's credited to Silas. The editors wanted to differentiate McKay's family-friendly works with the more adult-focused stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Keeping the brands separate.
So yeah, I want to discuss a bit of the culture of what being an artist around this time was. I think everybody had various books by this guy called Edward Muybridge.
Oh yeah.
So he was a photographer, and like famously he was commissioned.
He accidentally invented film.
Yeah. Am I jumping ahead of myself? Right here. Okay. Yeah. So he was kind of hired to. Somebody wanted to know like when a horse is running, is there any moment where all four hooves have no contact with the ground? Yeah, and yeah, he basically invented technology to capture that, and yeah, they discovered that there were moments where the hooves didn't touch the ground. So here's a quote from Scientific American magazine from 1878. Before these pictures were taken, no artist would have dared to draw a horse as a horse really is when in motion, if it had been possible for the unaided eye to detect his real attitude. So basically, think about that. Like before photography, if you had to draw a running horse, a horse that is galloping, you just had to do what you see in front of your eyes, and you can't view like the slow motional effect of a horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because like when we get into the Nemo scripts, there's a lot of animals being drawn, and they're drawing in, you know, galloping and running and just like complicated stances.
Yeah. It's such a kinetic strip, especially with background elements, because Nemo is not that dynamic of a figure, but everything around him is just constantly in motion. And I hadn't really thought about that.
So Muybridge made a career of capturing anything and everything in motion. And he created the zoetrope, which I think you alluded to. He sort of created film because right here it was basically an animation.
Right,
Uh,
right. Yeah.
He literally created it, or he just
Produced.
Well, he created this thing, and you would look into it's
Yeah.
a round object that would
But he
circle
didn't create
around
the
and
before it, like, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, when I say accidentally created, I don't think he ever intended to put picture after picture to show motion. I don't mean that he invented the idea of putting, like, he stumbled upon the process, I guess is what I meant, is taking all those pictures of the horse.
right.
It was I had always heard that it was somebody else who had come up with the idea of putting all of them one after another to see it happen, but I didn't realize he had invented the zoetrope. One of the
Yeah,
early
and that's like
animators.
yeah, that's basically early animation. Okay, so yeah, here we have like a little Sammy sneeze, and this is they all had the same formula. So they were all like 6 panels, and yeah, they
Yeah,
would
they kind
frequently
of.
end with him being kicked out.
Yeah, it's a good joke, but boy, imagine like week 37 of Little Sammy sneezed. Oh yeah, he got booted in the ass again. Okay, great, cool.
Yeah, and I think it changed eventually. Like it always ended with him like being kicked, but later on, I think the final panel would have more variety, like his mother helping him out, or someone educating him, or just sort of attempts to fix the aftermath of his big sneeze.
Do you know Eric actually offhand? So did he kind of graduate because Nemo is a full page strip? So did he go from like 3 panels to 6? Then they gave him like the full strip. Did they give him half a page first, and then they gave him a full page? Like, do you know anything about the genesis of that?
Of Little Nemo?
No, of his career in terms of the work that he got. Did he originally get a half page and then he got a full page, or like how did that?
Well, yeah, he was the number 2 artist basically, and so the number 1 artist would get the front page, and then
Right.
and it would be the front and the back page that were color. So like the number 2 artist would get the back page, and so for a while he was on the very back. Like the middle tier artists would get the interiors because those were 1 color comics.
Right.
But yes, over the course of his career, he starts out as the number 2 artist, and then yeah, he works his way up and becomes like the number 1. Yeah. The number 1 guy at the company. Okay, so yeah, they're basically that Muybridge guy. He had this book called The Animal Locomotion, and it basically just like had a full list of animals that he would show like micro moments. So the formula of this would be that Sammy would always sneeze in the 5th panel. At this time, the general public was fascinated by micro moments, the slowing down and freezing of time, as sort of scientific view of motion sequences. And that fascination was from advancements in photography. Because, yeah, that was the first time you would get like film and photography being so present. And that explained
Right.
quite a bit of like pop culture of that time.
Yeah. Especially because I guess photographic technology would have been much quicker, so you could have captured small moments rather than hold still for the next minute and a half to get this
Yeah.
portrait.
And like imagine seeing like a slow motion movie for the first time, or
Yeah.
like the example of like seeing a freeze frame of a horse running.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the entire public was just like fascinated by this. Something that's so
'Cause before
mundane
it was
to
like,
us.
yeah,
Like Taylor said, hold still, and then like as soon as the flash went, you we had to wait.
Yeah, you still had to wait, which is why you see like a lot of very stoic portraits of people
Right.
because you had to
Yeah,
stay still for so long.
what like the very first photograph took like 30 minutes or something to take?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like of the guys for like the view out his window and he just like held the plate up.
Okay, so we're gonna finish this out a bit, but like I just want to talk a little bit about Dream of the Rarebit Fiend, which is some people would argue that it's like superior work to Nemo. That's up to the individual or whatever. But like it goes in some very artsy, surrealist directions that Little Nemo doesn't necessarily go in. And Little Nemo had like a fixed protagonist, whereas Dream of the Rarebit Fiend always kind of had like a different protagonist. But do you guys know what rarebit is?
I've heard it. All I know is that it's a English food, maybe.
Welsh.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's Welsh. It's like melted cheese, and I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know what like the whole thing with Dream of the Rarebit
gives you
Fiend
the
is that-
itis.
If you eat it.
Yeah, so a character has a crazy dream, and they wake up saying, "Oh my god, why did I eat that rarebit?" And like I don't know what it was in the culture that made people realize that like, oh, if you had rarebits, you're gonna have a crazy dream.
Which is carried over into Nemo. A lot of the early
Right.
the gags are like, "Ah, I knew you shouldn't have eaten that sugar and turpentine before bed."
Yeah, it's interesting because it's always changing in Nemo, but like with Dream of the Rarebit theme, it's just like always rarebit.
Well, those dastardly Welsh, you never know what they're going to put into your head.
But again, it's interesting because you get like some color examples of rare Dream of the Rabbit Fiend, and then you get black and white, and like I think you get like a long one and then a short one, and that one went on for quite a while as well. I think like that was running concurrent with Little Nemo.
I did see like some hardcover reprints of the Rarebit stuff, and I kicked myself for not getting them. There was like a series of books, maybe like 3 or 4 books at this one bookstore in Vancouver, and I just never got them. And I think thanks for bringing it up, Barry.
It's amazingly creative work. Yeah. So we have
It's archival stuff. It's like you're not owning the papyrus, but you own like a coffee table book of history, essentially, about your favorite thing.
Yeah,
Like
you're-
comics are my favorite thing. That's history, right?
Yeah,
Well,
and
yeah, as long
it's
as
not
it's
as well
surviving.
known. But yeah, just such impressively creative work. Okay, so yeah, let me just show a couple more images and we'll move on to the next thing. Yeah, we just see a lot of like
Designo.
and around this part of the book, like little Nemo shows up eventually. But here we have Winsor McCay and his son. So little Nemo was sort of based off his son. This was in 1908, so his son was getting a little bit older at this time, but
He is almost as tall as his father.
yeah, that's right. And here we have some Nemo original art. It's always interesting seeing this stuff because like looks like this is cut in half, and it looks like some of this is like panels are pasted on to each other onto like a bare board. Like he drew individual panels or at least replaced him.
I never got to see any of this stuff preparing for this episode. That's actually really, I would want to see that in person.
Yeah,
I
right?
flipped through that book I flipped through Eric's book, but I just never gave it the thought.
We have the supplemental book. Look at this. This is this original art is cut in two, so it looks like he worked on 2 pieces of paper.
Well, you did say at the beginning he would just draw on whatever he had, and I wonder what are the requirements for a 1905 printing press. Like maybe it is like Yeah, I use whatever. I don't care. I'll find it. I'll make it work.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. But these, I think they were 28 inches by 22. So they were
Whoa.
huge.
Yeah, that's enormous.
But okay, so let's move on to the actual scripts. I just wanted to give a little bit of a context of just what he was going through. Okay, yeah, this book is huge. Okay, so let's open the book up. So
Do you want to do size comparison, or you just want to go into it? I mean, mine is probably what 2/3. No, it's probably like here it is next to my head.
Let me see. I have measured this out as mine is 12, 13, 14, 14 and a half inches long.
This I would say 11 or 12.
yeah, I'm not sure.
11 or 12 by about 8 or 9.
But I will pop up the size of this book. Yeah, on the
Yours
screen.
looks to be like 18 or something.
Yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, there's my hand. Like
My hand takes up like a quarter of this one. So this is yeah. That's a tomb right there.
Yeah.
yeah, it's man, these strips are so much fun. Like I was
Do you mind going
reading
back-
this stuff.
Can you flip back? I love how Taschen pulled off this kind of newspaper hue to the white pages. Those white pages are not white pages; they're newsprint quality pages.
Well, this light might be influencing a bit of that.
Well, even so,
yeah, mine's got a bit of a tint to it. It's
'cause
definitely
mine is completely what's white is completely white, and it was look at my camera. It's completely white, dude.
yeah.
Yeah, it's whiter than you.
Oh, that is white. I'm nearly
He white.
So yeah, we're all old enough to remember like daily newspaper strips. What are your guys' memories from growing up with newspaper strips?
So you and I, Eric, are from British Columbia, and the province newspaper, you know it, right?
Yeah.
And that was the one with the daily strips, and every Sunday there was the color fold out. And my parents got that paper. I lived for that paper every day. I would read all the strips at the back, you know.
It's kind of funny looking back because we were begging and boarding comics as kids, but like the newspaper was disposable to us. And I feel almost a little guilty now that I would just throw that stuff away and just enjoy it for the day and then it goes into the recycling bin.
well, the medium is the message. Like it is distributed and designed for that.
Yeah, but the only reason I say that now is because like this stuff was thrown away by most people, and we are grateful that some people kept and preserved that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't have enough room to keep like years and years of newspapers. So, you know, I wouldn't go back and change anything. But well, like, what were your favorite strips when you were growing up? What looking back in the '90s?
Just get Calvin. Do we even count Calvin and Hobbes, or is that its own thing? And
It
whatever
is a number one. There is nothing that beats it.
Calvin, let's get Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, that's
put that
fair.
out of the way. One Big Happy. I was invested in One Big Happy.
Oh,
I was
really?
invested in It wasn't Perry Judge Parker was still running. I was invested in that.
Parker.
Yeah, I wasn't into the serious ones. I wasn't into the drama ones. For some reason.
The artwork was really good, and if you read it every day, it kind of like made sense as it went along. Like two word balloons of dialogue, and then you have to wait till tomorrow for the next part. That kind of like would get to you, but if you were invested enough, it was a good one. And what else?
If we're taking Calvin and Hobbes off the table, because we all love it.
We have to, yeah. High and lows.
Foxtrot and is it Bizarro? Yeah, Bizarro, and because I was always attracted to like what is either interesting art or distinctive art. Because I'm not going to say Foxtrot had great art, but it was very distinctive.
For me, it was like this might be a deep cut, but I was into this strip called Monty, which started out as Robot Man, and then this like a new character came in, and then that character like ended up becoming bigger than Robot Man, and then they just renamed it Monty. But like from a humor perspective, that one actually made me laugh, and I look back at the Monty strips with a lot of reverence.
Colin, what was the one that you were?
I don't even know. Like, I can't even picture it. I don't think I ever read one.
And the illustrations are really good too.
I've seen it. It's the sort of thing that I think my grandparents lived in Sarasota, Florida, God's waiting room, for half the year, and this is the sort of I'm pretty sure Monty would show up in like the American comic strips.
Yeah.
Huh. But anyway, let's get this show on the road. What did you guys think reading this stuff? Because it was so much, like I was smiling ear to ear reading some of this stuff. I was surprised at how much enjoyment I got out of this stuff.
It's lush as hell.
Yeah.
Like he is putting so much into it.
Just so beautiful. And from a technical perspective, really good.
Yes.
Like we were talking about like Calvin and Hobbes, and you brought up like Foxtrot or whatever. Like Calvin and Hobbes on a technical perspective is amazing. And then a lot of the other strips that we grew up on, less so. But like Little Nemo from a technical perspective is like nobody beats it.
No.
On top of that, like just the smell of this book is amazing as well. Like I guess you get that too from your version, Taylor, the smaller Taschen one.
Let's see.
Is it the newspaper smell? Don't tell me it's the newspaper smell.
No, it's not. I'm not getting that.
No, but it's I guess it smells like it's matte paper, so it smells like some of those older matte paper strips. But yeah, just the whole package of this is just brilliant. Like, thank you, Taschen. You guys are doing such great work.
Does it open flat anywhere? Just can we establish that before we go any further?
It is
flat everywhere.
The binding is like top notch. I'm all about good binding.
Yeah, this one's also Taschen. I think it's glued. Is it glued?
Is it Taschen?
Yeah, it's Taschen. No, it's thread. It's sewn.
Nice.
It's Evergreen, which I think is owned by Taschen.
Oh
yeah. On the inside cover, it says it's copyright Taschen. Yeah.
Okay, so here we have King Morpheus. King Morpheus is requesting the boy Nemo to be brought to his kingdom of Slumberland. So basically the first 52 episodes, the first year of Little Nemo is Nemo's journey to meet the princess and eventually the king. And Little Nemo in Latin stands for no one. And also interestingly, like Nemo is told this horse is called Somnus, and Somnus is the Roman god of sleep. So like, kids story, but like lots of stuff in the background going on.
And that's real classical education stuff too. That's the sort of thing that because you were saying that the newspaper this ran in would have been aimed at kind of a more middle class.
Yeah.
I think that's the sort of thing that kids in school would have been learning about. Right, the Roman and Greek classics, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I also want to note that all these animals on this first strip, all these animals were in Edward Muybridge's book Animal Locomotion. So I guess like if you were an artist working at this time, you had Muybridge's books just to see what like a kangaroo looks like in motion. And
Yeah, imagine being a kid in New York in 1905 How else are you going to see a kangaroo?
Yeah. And that's another thing too, is like this is geared towards children. So like put these really wild and cool animals that you wouldn't get to see otherwise.
Yeah.
Just create something really fun for all audiences.
And in terms of the serialized format, like as a weekly strip or even a daily strip, it's very quickly established like the formula of how the strip's going to go. It's like the first panel is the catalyst, and the last panel he always ends up waking up from whatever dream it is, right? And it always ends up in from the top is usually taking up the whole top of the page, and the very last panel always takes the bottom right corner of the page as
Just
well,
the
and it
small,
always
small
ends up
corners.
that way. And there's still different pattern. What I like is he still develops different patterns of how to tell the story, but it always kind of ends up in this kind of from top left to top right in this staggered staircase storytelling type of thing too. He does a lot too. Like he'll use the smallest panel to start a scene, and then a longest panel to establish the whole world at the end of that scene before he moves on to something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good observation.
Yeah, and
Just using the space.
yeah, and to talk about like you mentioned like a staircase like pattern. Which it's interesting you brought that up because like this is 1905. Comics are less than a decade old
Yeah.
at this point, and you're trying to make it as readable as possible. And so this was the norm: is just create a very easily read grid. And I think this strip is the first time a comic artist is kind of like bending the medium a bit and almost trying to not break it, but like experiment and be playful just to discover new ways to be telling these stories. Right here, we have mushrooms introduced, and as the mushrooms grow, the panels grow and gets bigger here. It's at its biggest point here, and then when they start falling apart, the panels begin to shrink. And yeah, just very playful stuff.
Yeah, he's really trying to find the edges of what works and what doesn't for a comic strip. Like, can people read this? Yeah, well, we'll see.
Well, what I appreciate more about that is so in the second strip, he starts with that familiar top panel is the establishing scenario, and then the middle or the second row of panels is again just three equally spaced drawings, and then from there he kind of comes into this kerfuffle that ends up back in that bottom right corner. The end of the strip is the boy waking up every single time, right? And it keeps going back to that, and he just does it. Yeah, it's crazy. I think he kind of, I don't know if he was ahead of his time or if he just thought people were ready for this, but whatever it was, I mean, it's crazy.
Some people can
Yeah,
just see the future of a medium and the potential of it before everybody else, right?
yeah, we take it for granted. Like nobody had done stuff like this before, and just to try it out and experiment. It's something we take for granted. Is like somebody invented this, and it helps that he was numbering panels. All these panels are numbered because this was made for like a younger audience, and so I guess he felt like he had to teach people how it's supposed to be drawn. Because yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend a panel arrangement like this because you do have the worry of like, well, do I continue reading down and then here, or like it might be a little confusing. But he does have the numbers.
He drops them surprisingly quick, though.
Well, no, the numbers always stay there. I
Oh,
think.
do the numbers stay?
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah,
the rambling descriptions
yeah,
underneath
and
that he
that's a
drops.
that's another thing is how long did you guys realize? Oh, I don't need to be reading these rambling descriptions. Like, at what point did you give up?
Ooh, by that second page.
By the second thing, like I think it took me about 3 or 4 pages before I realized, "Oh, why am I still reading?" Like, the
Yeah.
it it's unnecessary. It's completely unnecessary.
I think I more started to notice it just to take in the whole shot. because I was really trying to get into this in preparation for this episode. So I saw them every time.
Did you read the text descriptions?
I read the text for those, but when it actually they just numbered the panels as you went, that still counts, right?
No, and to be fair, what I'm saying is like I wasn't looking at like I could tell it's meant to be read this way, but there is a potential confusion. But what I was asking is, how many strips did it take you before you stopped reading the text descriptions?
No, I always read them.
Oh, really?
That is
'Cause, like,
commitment.
That is commitment. Because
He abandoned them. I still like. That's what I mean. Is like when he started just numbering the panels. I don't know if I would take the number into account before I looked at the illustration.
no, I mean I didn't either.
They were useful for me.
Yeah,
especially
I read all the text though. Yeah.
Wow, good for
Until he
you.
abandoned that.
That's like reading all of the thought balloons in a Chris Claremont book.
Hey,
I read all that.
That's a good one.
Well, actually, maybe not necessarily the caption boxes.
I don't, and I think that's why I dropped. By the second page, I was like, "Oh, okay, it's just describing
No.
what's happening."
I don't like to do that. I like to take like if there's words on the page, you got to read them. So
That's fair. Yeah, he put it
Well,
in for a reason, and it was his.
You didn't need to read the text here, and that's the point that Taylor and I were making, which is it reads perfectly fine without all the text. It reads better actually, and he eventually realized that himself because he abandons it like maybe 20 strips in.
I was glad to see that because there is something to the idea of, well, he put these in, he put the work in, so take it all in, take in what he intended you to. And when he drops them, I was like, oh, okay, now, especially because it was so quick, I thought, oh, okay, well, now I don't feel too bad about not reading them. He realized he didn't need them.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's maybe he just got tired of it, or maybe it's just a respect for the audience. Like maybe you realize after a while, like let's let the visual do the work.
And
like people get it.
I think if you added up the space that they take up, that's some valuable real estate that you're missing out on.
It is, yeah.
But these decisions, he was making them himself, right? He had total carte blanche to do whatever he wanted with this strip.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not 100% on the editorial insights that would happen, but yeah, for the most part, I think this is all him.